Hello, welcome to the August ANA Regional Bi-Monthly webinar. Today we are excited to highlight two family and child advocacy centers, the American Indian Family Center of Minnesota and the Tulalip Children's Advocacy Center and Legacy of Healing of Washington. This webinar is made possible by the Administration for Native Americans, ANA. ANA strives to promote self-sufficiency for Native Americans by providing discretionary grant funding for community-based projects and training and technical assistance to eligible tribes and Native organizations. There are 5 grant programs under ANA for Native communities. The vision for ANA is that all Native communities are thriving. There are 4 regional centers that work with ANA to provide support through trainings and technical assistance to tribes, tribal organizations, and Native people in the United States and Pacific territories. The Western region serves states from the Pacific coast up to Montana and down to New Mexico. The Eastern region covers states from the Dakotas to Texas and the Atlantic coast. The Alaska region serves the entire 49th and largest state in the Union, and the Pacific region serves Hawaii and the Pacific territories. ANA's regional training and technical assistance centers offer free trainings, technical assistance, webinars, and useful tools and guides to assist you in preparing applications for ANA. We also provide support and technical assistance to projects once they're funded. Okay, my name is Eric Watson, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. My current role is training manager for 3-Star Government Solutions, who is the technical and training assistance provider for the Alaska region. I'm a Inupiaq, Athabascan, and a lifelong Alaskan. I'd like to now introduce our 2 presenters. Okay. Our first presenter is Laura Dorn, Family and Youth Services Director for the American Indian Family Center. She's a member of the Red Lake Band of Ojibwe in northern Minnesota. Laura started at AIFC as an intern in 2015 while getting a master's degree in public policy. In 2017, Laura was hired by AIFC as the mental health targeted case manager. Laura is currently starting a new department at AIFC, the Policy and Research, which will cover holistic program evaluation and research policy practices. Our second presenter is Kylie Wickham, lead family advocate for the Tulalip Children's Advocacy Center and Legacy of Healing since February of 2022. She holds a master's degree in criminal justice and has worked as a case manager for homeless veterans in Seattle, Washington. Prior to being the lead family advocate, she has worked for the Tulalip Police Department as a law enforcement embedded social worker and has created a new victim services program for the department. Kylie has been volunteering as a domestic violence and sexual assault crisis advocate with the Seattle Police Department's victim support team since May of 2019. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you, Eric. Like Eric said, my name is Laura Dorn, and I work at the American Indian Family Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I was the Family and Youth Services Director, kind of in between that role and the Policy and Research Director. And so thank you for having me here today. I'm really excited to be here and share with you all the great work that we do at the Family Center. The AIFC was initially started in 1994 in Ramsey County under a children's initiative. And in 1995, they established their location in East St. Paul. And then we were able to start offering services in 1997, which focused around connecting the family and working intergenerational. And we obtained permanent status in 2001 as a nonprofit. And our mission is to provide American Indian families with programs and services by traditional values and culture. And our vision is to be a place where American Indian families thrive. So our organization focuses on 4 core areas: behavioral health programming, chemical health, family youth services, and then within family and youth is our employment and housing. The first one that has been around the longest is our behavioral health programming. And we offer therapy and case management services. And then while we were in person, we were still kind of remote and in person, but we offered a few programs for family and youth trauma focus groups. Our therapy, we have on staff right now 4 therapists and then 2 case managers, one focusing on adult case management and the other focusing on youth case management. And our trauma focus groups, right now we have a group called Sikis and Dodem, which focuses on working with parents and the youth through healing and historical trauma. Our chemical health programming is brand new. It started the first week of going to virtual programming in the beginning of the pandemic. And it's called Kunchi Onakan, Grandmother's Arms. And it's been a very successful program. We've been able to reach many participants. It is a women's focused group and individual counseling program. We have 3 counselors, and they provide a group that runs 3 days a week, and they focus on the variety side of treatment and working not only on the chemical health recovery, but also working with our behavioral health staff to provide that one-on-one support in addition to the chemical health counselors. It's all culturally specific programming. We receive referrals from outside of the agency, but we do a lot of wraparound service care, and we've been having a lot of our families utilizing this program as well and have seen a lot of success stories. Our next area is housing and employment services. The first one is Ticha Owichikiapi TP, which means helping the homeless build. And we provide housing accessibility, which means we're trying to provide our homeless community with opportunities to become housed. We don't just focus on getting them housed. We focus on all the things that prevented them from becoming housed previously, what led to them becoming homeless. We provide them all the supports that we can provide within one agency. And then we have our housing stability program, which is where we work on homeless prevention services. We have families that come in that are on the verge of losing their housing or might be in a utility shutoff, and we're able to provide support for them through monetary support, but also providing them light touch case management services to help them overcome living in constant crisis mode. The employment services is Zuya Wo Ohia, which is Journey to Success, and is based off of our Minnesota Family Investment Program, which is MFIP. And we work with the county to provide these services to our Native families. They're able to receive, in addition to their monthly support, they're able to receive educational training, work training. They are invited to join in our more culturally specific services. They're provided one-on-one coaching and case management as well. Our youth programming is pretty brand new. This area is actually funded with ANA, and it's called Waban Ogimawag, which is Tomorrow's Leaders. And it focuses on our Native Youth Advisory Council and intergenerational programming, academic achievement, and career training. Our Native Youth Advisory Council, they meet with the Elders Advisory Council that we have within the AIFC, and they meet with our AIFC Board of Directors to make changes in the programming that we have or offer opinions and guidance on how our youth program should look. They come up with needs assessments for the youth that they can take. They reach out to the youth to see kind of what services they're looking for and how they can be more involved. Then there is intergenerational programming. This has been a really great success that we've been able to establish over the last few years. We've been able to integrate winter storytelling, ceremony. They just started offering full moon ceremonies each month to teach our younger women and girls how to go through their moon and what that means as a person in the Indigenous community. We also have academic achievement, which includes tutoring services, and then career training, kind of helping the youth figure out what they want to do when they graduate high school, what they want to do while they're in high school, getting those building blocks ready for them to be successful. And then there is our family programming. I struggle saying all of these 3, but the first one is Bimadijiwin Makana, which is the Path of Life family program. And since the beginning of the pandemic, we have integrated that into our Sugizin Dodem family therapy program to come together, and it's been really successful. We've been able to evaluate and holistically watch these journeys of our participants start from the beginning of the pandemic and the struggles they were going through, and to see where they are now 2.5 years later. It's been really great. But that is offered to parents of any type. They can be parents, they can be grandparents, they can be aunts and uncles, but the end goal of that is to have them become supports for other parents in the community. And then we have Ambiaya Anishinaabe and Niniwug, which is Rise Up Original Men. And that is our men's smudge group parenting support, and he offers, our men's leader, he offers ceremony as well. They actually just got a partnership with a local conservancy in the area, and they're able to offer sweat lodge once a week, drum circles, and then they provide a men's smudge group once a week, which is a support group for participants actually across the entire country and some in Canada. And then our third family programming is Wakanyeha Kin Wakanpi, which is Our Children Are Sacred. And this includes the prenatal, postnatal, and parenting support. This is for new parents. Typically, it's moms that are prenatal and then with their children through 13 months. And we go through car seat safety, secondhand and third-hand smoke, SIDS, how to culturally support and work your way through the many challenges that can come with after birth. And when you go through, for example, like our car seat training, we're able to provide a car seat to parents. Safe sleeping, we're able to provide a pack and play, and now some other additional items like, I can't remember what they're called, like bumper beds, sleeper beds for newborns and infants. And that is the Family Center. I could go on and on and on, but I will go back to you, Eric.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you for the amazing presentation and highlighting the work that you guys are doing in your community. Okay, the second half of this webinar will be facilitated by Kaylee Wickham of the Tulalip Tribe's Children Advocacy Center and Legacy of Healing.
Hi, so I'm Kaylee Wickham. I'm the lead advocate with the Tulalip Children's Advocacy Center and Legacy of Healing. Normally, our director, Jade Corella, would be here giving this presentation, but she is out of the country this month. Jade is a Tulalip tribal member, and she served as our director for the last 3 years and has worked for Tulalip her whole life. So she's a really great resource. So just a brief history of our two programs. Back in 2007, the Tulalip tribes began to plan to create a children's advocacy center. And this was as a response to the lack of resources within our tribal police department and our Indian child welfare departments to meet the needs of child victims. Around this time, our first multidisciplinary team was also established, which included staff from both those departments, as well as outside law enforcement jurisdictions and the FBI and our medical staff. Then in 2009, the Children's Advocacy Center was officially established. And in 2014, the Legacy of Healing Safe House began, or LOH as we call it, began serving adult victims of intimate partner violence and sexual assault. So they were two separate centers for a time. In 2017, our CAC was accredited by the National Children's Advocacy Center, which opened us up to a lot more resources and funding, and made sure that all of our staff were meeting basic standards to provide services. And then in 2019, our CAC and LOH merged under one director, Jade. And this was to increase consistency, capacity, and decrease duplication of services. All of our advocates are now cross-trained to work with both adults and children. And we are now able to offer forensic interviews for adult victims instead of just children. Unfortunately, in 2020, the Safe House portion of Legacy of Healing closed because of COVID. But since then, we've just shifted our focus to transitional housing and securing additional grants to bridge that gap. So a little bit about our staff. At our Children's Advocacy Center, we have our program coordinator, who also serves as our forensic interviewer. We also have 2 child therapists and 1 child advocate who works with all of our sexual assault cases. She also does our education outreach programs. At Legacy of Healing, we have 2 victim advocates that do general advocacy. We have 1 legal advocate who attends court with all of our clients. And we also have a therapist to work with adult victims of domestic violence. And then over both of our centers, we have our director, we have myself, the lead advocate. I supervise the advocates over both centers. And then I also work with all of our non-sexual assault child cases. And then we also have our receptionist and executive assistant, like our support staff. So we primarily serve members of the Tulalip community who have been victims of crime. That's Tulalip tribal members, spouses, parents, and children of Tulalip tribal members. And we also work with members of other tribes. We will work with non-Native victims and survivors as long as there's some connection to the tribes, such as the crime occurring on our reservation or the perpetrator is a tribal member. We just evaluate on a case-by-case basis. Our advocates at Legacy of Healing work with victims and survivors of intimate partner domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and sex trafficking. And at the Children's Advocacy Center, we work with children who are victims and survivors or witnesses of crime. So accessing our services at our CAC, those referrals typically come from law enforcement, CPS, or the DACHA, which is our Indian Child Welfare Department. Self-referrals to the CAC do happen, but they are pretty rare because the purpose of a CAC is to coordinate with law enforcement and CPS and those sorts of systems. So we will typically receive children who were referred for a forensic interview from law enforcement, or law enforcement has called us on scene with them to respond right away, or a CPS intake is made. And so we receive all that information. At Legacy of Healing, it is typically self-referral. We can receive referrals from outside providers as long as we have permission from the primary victim to reach out to them. And we also do get calls from law enforcement to respond on scene with them. We do not directly reach out to victims or do any cold calls without the victim's permission ahead of time, because this could put both the victim and our advocates in danger. We want to make sure that we have permission and that the phone number reaching out to is safe. So that's typically self-referral for LOH. At both the CAC and LOH, we provide accompaniment to the victims and non-offending family members to court proceedings, or we attend on their behalf and provide them with updates to provide that emotional support. We assist clients with obtaining protection orders or going through other court forms. Legacy of Healing has an attorney that we can refer clients to for domestic violence protection orders. And then we also contract with some outside agencies to get other legal representation. We accompany victims to emergency medical exams and follow-up appointments. We provide transportation to hearings and other related appointments. We respond with law enforcement to provide immediate crisis advocacy on scene. All of our advocates participate in an on-call schedule. Myself, I got an on-call call yesterday and had to respond to the hospital with CPS. So we do that too. We want to provide as immediate advocacy as possible. And then also forensic interviews. We generally provide emotional support. We answer questions about the criminal justice process and serve as a resource and information hub for our clients as they navigate all the different systems. We also have some grant-funded emergency financial assistance to pay for things like bills, food, hygiene products, safety items like security cameras. And then sometimes we can pay for emergency hotel stays for a night, or when somebody's waiting to get into shelter, things like that. And then we provide other services and support depending on clients' needs on a case-by-case basis. And then we also provide general case coordination through our multidisciplinary team, which we now have a team for each of our centers. So twice a month, we sit down with our tribal police, tribal prosecutor, the county prosecutor, the FBI, CPS, and Indian Child Welfare to coordinate cases, see how the investigation is going, and just generally stay in the know on that so we can provide that information to our clients. And then I just wanted to provide a couple of success stories from each of our centers. So the first one is for Legacy of Healing. This was a case of domestic violence, and the abuse really permeated through every aspect of the victim's life. It was financial, emotional, social isolation. There was intimidation with weapons, animal abuse, child abuse, and just generally escalating violence. During the most recent incident, it was a physical assault and a strangulation, and one of the children called our tribal police. One of our advocates was able to respond with police and took the survivor to the hospital right away for a forensic nurse exam to make sure that she was okay. We also did forensic interviews with the children since they were witnesses to what happened. And then the case went through prosecution unusually fast. I think it was about 6 months from this most recent incident until the case was closed. So the perpetrator received a very high bail. The victim worked with our attorney and legal advocate and was able to get a lifetime protection order for herself and her children, one that will never expire. And the end result in the criminal case was that he received 4 years of incarceration. He has also been excluded from the reservation. He's not allowed to step foot on our reservation and was ordered to pay restitution. The victim provided a very powerful victim impact statement, which allowed her to really have her experience heard in front of the court. She's been receiving counseling through our center and has been able to finally focus on her own health. She's now enrolled in school. Her children also received counseling through our Children's Advocacy Center. And in general, she's doing very well now. And then another case to highlight with our Children's Advocacy Center, the victim was a teenage female who had, it was a sexual assault by another classmate at her school. So the advocate responded with law enforcement at the time of the initial report. I was actually the advocate on scene for this. And so I was able to be there with her as she answered those initial questions from law enforcement and provide her with the next steps of what is going to happen next. She also had a forensic interview done and continued to work with an advocate at our center for the duration of her case, and she is still working with that advocate. She was also granted a permanent protection order until she turns 18, so she can continue to finish out high school without worry of the perpetrator being there in class with her. As a result of this, she was experiencing nightmares and severe anxiety about being in unfamiliar places. So she's been working with one of our therapists and has been attending consistently. And the therapist shared with me that she has recently passed her driving test and is starting to go back to work and just feels a lot more freedom to be in those unfamiliar places, has a lot less anxiety symptoms, and is generally doing pretty well. As far as the criminal case in this situation, juvenile court is much slower. So we probably will not have charges filed until next year. So we're just providing the other support to the client as we can until that kicks off. And we'll continue to work with her until everything is resolved and she feels she no longer needs us.
All right. Thank you, Kaylee, for sharing that information about the impact your organization is having in your community. I appreciate it. On behalf of ANA, I'd like to thank you for attending today's webinar and to both of our presenters. If you have any questions about the webinar or would like to reach out individually to our presenters, please feel free to contact the Alaska TTA Center. You can also sign up for our newsletter, follow us on Facebook, and visit our website for additional information. In the chat box, earlier in the webinar and right now, you'll see that there's a link to our post-webinar survey. We'd really appreciate your feedback to help us improve future webinars that we're going to offer. The link to the survey is also going to be included in the post-webinar email that we're going to be sending out. Everyone take care, have a fantastic week, what's left of it, and hope the weather's good where you're at. Take care.